I'm the only program where Jason Fettig, who's right across the street from me, he runs the Marine Band. I run the Navy Band, but we also provide oversight. I also field all of the Navy fleet bands are field activities of the Navy Band, Washington, D.C. So they all belong to us. We're all under one umbrella.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. Are you planning to travel with your group sometime soon? If so, please consider my sponsor, Kaleidoscope Adventures, a full-service tour company specializing in student group travel. With a former educator as its CEO, Kaleidoscope Adventures is dedicated to changing student lives through travel, and they offer high-quality service and an attention to detail that comes from more than 25 years of student travel experience. Trust Kaleidoscope's outstanding staff to focus on your group's one-of-a-kind adventure so that you can focus on everything else. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Jake Walker and Colin Peters for their contributions to the show, and especially to all of you who are listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now for my next guest, Captain Kenneth Collins of the United States Navy Band. Hi, Captain Collins. How are you?
Good evening, Mark. It's great to be with you.
So I should address you as Captain Collins for the interview? Is that what's most comfortable?
I wish you would call me Ken. That would make me far more comfortable.
Okay, but I want to be respectful of your position and lofty rank. I know Captain is a high rank in the Navy.
Well, it's due to a lot of help of a lot of people along the way, so I can't claim it all for myself. But I'm Ken. That's
all right, Ken. I have a ton of questions for you, but before we get to all of those questions, let me have you introduce yourself to the listeners, just very briefly. Tell them what your role is and what you're doing right now, and then I'll ask you about how you got into music.
Okay. Well, I'm Captain Ken Collins. I'm the commanding officer of the United States Navy Band, Washington, D.C., and also head of the Navy music program for the United States Navy.
Excellent. All right. So here's the big question. Ken, what's your origin story? How did you get started in music?
Well, my dad was a band director. Now, does that sound familiar, right? My father was a band director. And honestly, I knew from the time I was small, I used to go around and watch my dad. I would go to school with him. And by the time I was very young, I'm talking kindergarten or first grade, I just had an attraction to the drums. I knew that that's what I wanted to do, just watching my dad's drummers. And my dad was really into the big band. So his school programs, he never really had a marching band or anything like that. But it was all about the jazz band for him. And watching those drummers, there was just an attraction for me to all of that. So, and he fed me music, right? As a little kid, when I would come home or whatever, we would listen. It was a lot of big band jazz that I listened to. And I remember my mother actually buying a drum set from our next door neighbor when I was like in the third grade. And brought it home, and I was just goofing around on it. And I remember my dad bringing in and putting headphones on me. I can still remember this, and putting on the Count Basie Orchestra, an album called Standing Ovation, which was, I think it came out in the late 60s, which was the Basie Band live at the Tropicana in Las Vegas. And he said, this is the stuff that you want to play along to. So, I pretended that I was Harold Jones on the drums, which I wasn't. I can imagine what I sounded like. And I can still remember Down for Double and Little Darlin' was the second tune on that album, if I remember. So if you think about it, it was a nice medium swing tune to start with, and then a slow brushes tune. And I'm sure I sounded awful, but it was the feeling of I could just imagine myself playing drums with the Basie Big Band, when I was in the third or fourth grade. So I was just hooked sort of immediately to that, and constantly playing to albums. And he kept feeding me. My dad was a trumpet player, so I would get he loved Maynard Ferguson. So I remember the MF albums where I played to Eli's Common and MacArthur Park and all that stuff. And so I was just attracted to the drums, and I went through all the way through playing that way. I grew up in Reno, Nevada, which was lucky for that because at the time in Reno, we had all those showrooms, and all the stars would come through all the time, and every single casino actually back then had a big band in it, right? So we had a ton of musicians in town. There were big bands everywhere to hear, and the university program at that time was run by a gentleman named John Carrico, who I can still remember. And he had started the Reno International Jazz Festival, which is a huge jazz festival there. So I would go. My dad's band would always play at the Reno International Jazz Festival. And I remember that my parents couldn't believe, even as a young kid, like I would sit through the whole day and watch all the school bands, and I just absolutely loved it. So in the end, I thought that's what I want to do. I'm going to stay here in Reno, and I'm going to get the Harris showroom drum gig. That's what I'm going to play 2 shows a night. And I just couldn't wait to do that. I went through high school, did the whole high school band thing. I think my high school is a great example. My father used to tell me, he says, it takes 10 years to build a program. It takes 1 year for it to be completely ruined. And I lived through that. That was my high school musical experience. Was I had 3 band directors in 4 years. So the first 2 years, a pretty respectable program that we had a large group, but really the focus was on jazz. So you were in concert band only because you had to be in concert band to be in the jazz band. That was sort of the rule. But we had a decent concert band. And then my junior year, we had a band director come in who just um, didn't care for the program or whatever it was, but it went downhill. And I'll never forget going to school the first day of my senior year, because being in band was not an option for me. That was just what you did. And I showed up in the band room, and like there were 11 kids there, and I was like, what happened? The whole program had, the program had been what my dad had said had come true. The program was gone overnight. And so I didn't really know what I was going to do musically, and I was very lucky. There's a gentleman that was director of bands at the University of Nevada for many, many years. I thought, when I left high school, that was it. That maybe this is it. Maybe this is the end of it. I enrolled at the University of Nevada there in Reno as a journalism major, actually, and thought I would just play for fun. And Dr. Mac McGranahan, who was the longtime director of bands at the University of Nevada, he had actually offered me a scholarship to come there to play in the marching band, which I thought was awesome because I had never been in a marching band like that big. We didn't have a school marching band of anything like the university's band, and his wind ensemble, which I'd experienced some wind ensemble literature in high school, little stuff. I can still remember the first piece I played was Francis Macbeth's Mask. I remember that. I still remember the ostinato snare drum part on that from my freshman year. So I had never played on ensembles like that when I went to University of Nevada, but in my head was, I don't know that I'm good enough to do this, right? I've jumped up to this next level. Am I good enough to be there? And it was Mac, and this is the impact educators can have on somebody's life, and it had a direct impact on where my life is now. Mac pulling me aside and saying, so what's your major? And I told him I was a journalism major, and he said, it's funny because I see you're in the band room all the time. You're over in the music department all the time. You're always practicing. You practice more than our music majors practice. Well, why aren't you a music major? And I said, well, I just didn't know. I was honest with him. I said, I didn't know if I was good enough to do that. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And he said, you're absolutely good enough to do this if you want to. Is it what you want to do? And I told him yes. And he said, come and see me. We'll change your major. And that's what I did. And so Mac, you know what I mean? That's the impact. That's that power of one, the power of a music educator who, I tell him this, and luckily, and I tell people to tell their educators all the time, those people who made that difference in your life, I owe Mac everything. I can't overstate the importance that he had in the direction that my career took. And then also going to a smaller school. I didn't go to Eastman. I didn't go to, Juilliard, one of those schools where I had the opportunity to play in these different ensembles. But again, being in Reno, where my teachers were the folks who were working in those showrooms, were the people who were the professional musicians. So they were teaching me how to be a professional musician right from the start. They knew that my goal was to play. I was an education major. I need to say that because my father told me I would be an education major. He said, son, you have to have something to fall back on, which I don't. As I've gotten older, I'm not so sure I necessarily agree with that. To go into teaching as something to fall back on, I think is disrespectful to education. But I was an ed major as I went through, but I really went through with the mindset that I wanted to play all the way through my degree program. I will tell you where I am now. I'm really glad that I went to my methods classes. That was the thing I enjoyed the most actually about my ed degree were the methods classes because I got to play. And so I remember I would get in a little bit of trouble because we'd finish. I never forget finishing class woodwinds, and I really enjoyed playing clarinet. I enjoyed the challenge of it. And so I wanted to take lessons on clarinet, and they had to kind of go, you don't have time for that. You're moving on. You're into class brass now. But I just enjoyed playing the instrument. Do you know what I mean? I enjoyed that experience of playing and trying to get better all the time. So I went all the way through, and then it came time, right? I was student teaching. I had gotten married, and it was time to make what are we going to do? And it was right about that time that all of the bands started folding in all of the showrooms in Nevada, and it's all really pretty much gone by the wayside. And I remember my wife telling me, "Well, what are we going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm playing. I'm getting plenty of work here. I'm playing." And thank goodness for my wife who had a lot of foresight. She said, "That's great, but what are we going to do when you're 40?" And I hadn't thought even ahead to what I was going to do when I was 30. And what happened? You can't make this up, but the United States Navy Band, Washington, D.C., my last year of college, came through on a tour. I um, I only got to see half the concert because Mac McGranahan at that time to help me out. Another thing he did to help me out, I was a young married person. So he'd given me the basketball band, and the basketball band was mine, and I was directing the basketball band to give me money, to again provide me some funding. And I told him, I really want to go to the Navy band concert. I want to hear this. I didn't really know what it was. And he said, that's fine, but you have an obligation. You do the basketball band, and then you can come see the second half of the concert. So I did it. And I saw the second half of the concert, and I thought, I didn't know I could do this. I just, being from the West Coast, I really had no experience with military bands. I didn't know I could do it for a living. So after the concert, I found a little brochure out back about Navy bands, and I went around and talked to the timpanist, whose name was Bob Snyder, a wonderful gentleman. And I talked to him about, what I wanted to do and asked him a bit about military music. And he said, well, we don't have any openings right now, but you can audition for one of our fleet bands. And I said, all right. And the next day I went down to a Navy recruiter and I scheduled an audition, and there we go. So that's a long-winded origin story there, Mark, probably more than you wanted to hear, but that's how I came to the Navy.
No, believe it or not, in these interviews, long-winded is good because it means I have less editing to do along the way. So no, that was great. I have some questions though. I accumulate questions. You see me writing as you're talking, and so I have plenty. Here I'm going to kind of work backwards because they're most fresh in my mind. First of all, I went to college at Chico State in Northern California, and not very far from Reno, just a couple hours. And my best friend was from Las Vegas, and this was in the very end of the 1980s. And I remember him talking about the bands in Las Vegas at the time folding, and that the whole thing about no canned music, live music, and so
It was so sad. I remember one of my first teachers was a gentleman who's since passed away, and he had been in the Navy, actually been in the Navy music program. But he was one of my teachers. He was the Harris Show Band drummer. His name was Jerry Gennario, and I had been I came in the Navy and I'd gone to my first duty station. I was in the Navy Band in Guam, which was a great experience. But I came back about 4 years later, home on leave, and I wanted to go talk to Jerry just to say thank you for everything he'd done. And I went into the place. It was a place. It was a music store where he taught lessons, and I went in there and asked where Jerry was, and they said, "Oh, he had to take a gig with Debbie Reynolds. He's out on the road with Debbie Reynolds." And Jerry was a grandfather at that point in time. I mean, he was late in his 60s, but because the Harris job had folded, this is what he was having to do, to make a living. And I remember that hit me especially hard, and also told me how smart my wife was, actually.
Yeah, no, it was an era and the end of an era for sure at that time. So the other thing I was going to say is you mentioned methods classes, and I was going to say that as a teacher, I started teaching beginning band just a few years ago. I kind of worked my way backwards down the ranks, and teaching beginners. I don't think the methods classes are necessarily about teaching beginners as much as music education students believe they are. I do think a lot of it is what you said. It's getting that basic information because there's so much more to learn when you teach a kid than what you can get just a couple weeks in a methods course. So
Oh,
it's
I can't
interesting.
imagine. I mean, I remember thinking to myself as I did go out and student teach. I student taught at a really good program, but I remember thinking, I know I've been through all these method classes, but if I have a trumpet player who shows up and doesn't know how to play, I don't, I don't think I'm equipped to really teach this kid. What am I going to do if I say play a B flat and he can't do it? I was scared to death.
Oh, absolutely. It's like anything else. You develop a bag of tricks, and you know what to say, or have like five things to say, and eventually one of them usually works. It's interesting. The different techniques. One kid will respond to one thing, and then the other one will be like, "It still doesn't work." You just have to keep trying. That's teaching. The other thing is, I think when your father said having education to fall back on, I think that's an unfortunate phrase, but I don't think it's a bad thing to have a music education degree. I think it's just poor wording, and everyone in the field's kind of guilty of it if you think about it. Oh, I'm going to get that ed degree to fall back on, but it's really, I mean, we want teachers who were in the Navy bands or in the Marine band. We want these people. These are talented musicians who should be teaching our kids if they have any interest in teaching at all. So I think it's just the language to it, at least from my perspective as an older teacher.
Absolutely. And I mean, look, music, it's an apprenticeship, right? It's still an apprenticeship. So you don't get where you are without a teacher. So the teachers are the most valuable thing. As I sit in the United States Navy Band, I'm actually the beneficiary of all the teaching that has gone on, who provide us the players that we do. Without it, is still very much an apprenticeship. And so I feel that way where we sit right now. It's our job to give back, because if we don't do that, music doesn't just happen. It needs to be actively perpetuated, right? The craft needs to be perpetuated. And that only happens through educators who are willing to sit, you know, with me as I sound horrible on the drums, and just take me step by step through that, so that, maybe I do develop into something that can create some art for the world at some point in time.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing is you mentioned you're from Reno, and the jazz festival there is so important to that region. I know it's international, I know it's national, but when I taught in California high school band, the Reno Jazz Festival was one of the two things we did every year that was non-negotiable. I took my big band, whether they were good, whether they were bad, to the Reno Jazz Festival. Some years the judges hammered us, and some years I had kids win awards. We were never going to win like the big top band thing, but I did have a kid one year who won like best soloist for the whole festival. So,
No, and I think it's great for kids, because it's really not about whether you win or lose, which, I sort of hate those
yeah, we'll
terms when
we'll
it
get to
comes
that.
to music. But it is about, did you see somebody who inspired you? Did you see a couple of things, not just the professionals, but did you go see another school group where it was a kid your age, or some kids your age, and said, why can't we do that? I think we could do that.
And kids they understand their place. It's like being on a sports team. When if you're looking at a school from say the Sacramento area that has a huge jazz program and a huge student body. I was teaching at a small school with 500 kids. We weren't going to be Rio Americano. We just weren't going to be them. But the kids could see them and they could identify with those other kids who were doing it. And it's just so valuable.
Absolutely. It's just a great experience. And that we had that in our own backyard. I just can't believe how lucky I was that I grew up. And going through high school, I ended up, they would have us, we would be the volunteers. So I would be, back then it was tapes, right? Cassette
Hmm.
tapes. So we would
Sure.
be running the cassette tapes back and forth. And it was always a big deal for us to get that. When you were old enough to get the Reno Jazz Festival, staff shirt, we got, I'm on the Reno Jazz Festival staff, which just meant that we were the unpaid help, but we were proud of those T-shirts that we had.
Absolutely. I still have the tapes from when I was a band director, the cassette tapes from the judges. Not that I'll ever listen to them, but there's just something very nostalgic and special about having those things. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. So my son is 10, and he started band this year, and he chose drums. I think it's to curse, like it's karma coming back to get me.
The thing about a beginning drummer is for some other instruments, when you very start, you can't really make a sound yet. The thing about drums is you can be as loud as the best drummer in the world right from day one. So I give my parents, thank goodness for my dad and my mother. I never had once where they came into my room and said, "Could you give it a rest?" If I wanted to practice, I could practice. Now, my dad made sure I had a practice pad so that there was time to work stuff out on a practice pad. But when I was working stuff out on the drums, I cannot remember a time in my childhood where they ever came in and said, "Hey, we need you to give it a rest." They encouraged it, and I think about that now and think, wow, it must have sounded. I mean, I don't know if they had earplugs in or whatever, but they put up with it as long as I wanted to play.
Did your dad get you a drum set early, or was it mostly practice pad in the beginning?
It was actually my mother who bought me a drum set. Our next door neighbor was a high school kid, had a drum set, and he didn't want to play anymore. And my mother went over and talked to him and bought the drum set. It was an old Ludwig, beat up Ludwig drum kit. It was I still remember, it was a blue sparkles, like a 1960s kind of thing. And things didn't work right, and they were broken on it. So that also taught me the important thing. I mean, right, of like, how do you fix things? How do this stand is broken, which comes in handy as a drummer. And certainly, if you're going to teach, you know what I mean, and you're out there, things are going to break left and right. So I learned early on, how to repair, how to triage, whatever I needed to do to make that set work.
So you went to, you said Reno for your undergrad. You stayed in town, and you joined the Navy before you student taught. What were your first assignments in the Navy as far as the fleet bands?
So yeah, I joined the Navy as soon as I graduated. I had auditioned, won the job, and the Navy was great with me. They let me finish my degree, and I did. And then our first assignment was supposed to be, this is kind of a funny story, but it was definitely told me what the Navy was going to be like for my wife and I. We were slated to go to the Navy band in San Diego, which I thought, great, that's kind of close to home, West Coast, and I had never been off mark. I had never traveled east of the Mississippi. I mean, I really was a West Coast kid. I hadn't traveled. So when I say the Navy opened up the world to me, it did, because uh, very quickly after I got out of boot camp, they informed me. I was at our A school in Little Creek, Virginia, in Norfolk, and they informed me that you're going to go a little further west than San Diego. We've just had something happen, and you will be going to Navy Band Guam.
Okay.
And I have to say, I had to go home and tell my wife that we weren't going to San Diego and we were going to Guam. And she said, "Where is Guam?" And so at that time, there was no internet. And I'll never forget, we went to the library in Norfolk and got out the atlas, and that didn't help because you could barely see. It was a little spot in the Pacific Ocean. But I will tell you what, I learned more about the power of music. I spent 4.5 years out there from 90 to 94, 4.5 years on the island of Guam. We had a little 20-piece band out there, and we traveled all over those Micronesian islands, little islands like Palau and Ponape and Yap and Chuuk and Kosrae. And we did trips to Japan and the Philippines. And I actually saw for the first time like the power of music to communicate, and it stuck with me forever. We go to a little tiny island of Kosrae. We don't speak their language. We have nothing in common with these people. There's almost no electricity, so we get off the back of a pickup truck. What can we do? Put together a little brass band with, I've got a little drum set together, and we start playing and immediately we're communicating with these people who we would have had no, there would have been no reason to communicate, no reason for our paths to have crossed. But in an hour's time, we are we have communed, if that makes sense. We have communed, and occasionally they would bring out their instruments or whatever, and then we're just kind of back and forth. We are speaking to each other through music, and that, um, what an education that was for me about yes, music is powerful in the concert hall, but it's just as powerful uh, on a flatbed truck on the island of Kosrae when you are communicating. What a powerful communication tool it was. And those 4.5 years, I was supposed to be out there for two, but we extended voluntarily. I extended 2 more years because I just loved what we were doing out there so much, to the point in time where the Navy came to me and said, Ken, we know you love it out there, but you got to pick a place or we're picking some place for you. So my next duty station was in Newport, Rhode Island, a little bit different than Guam, a little more formal. And then as I was moving through that, I started to move into positions of leadership, and people talked to me about, hey, would you consider, you might consider being an officer and being a conductor. And I had gotten an opportunity, and it was great with the small group out in Guam when we would do small ceremonies and such. They'd given me an opportunity to do some conducting, some small conducting. So I'd gotten my feet wet. And I had done some in college, of course, being an ed major. And I guess I kind of really liked kind of being in front of the band and being able to shape things and trying to figure out how to make, especially like a 20-piece band, like what can we do? What can we do that will sound good? How do we make it sound right? And you've got good musicians. I mean, we're talking professional level musicians. So I enjoyed that. So when I got to Newport, I got to a leadership point where they asked me to put in a package to become an officer, to become a conductor. And then I was lucky enough to be selected to be an officer. I was actually running our rock band, Rhode Island Sound, in Newport, Rhode Island at the time. We were doing recruiting tours all over the Northeast. I mean, I have a pretty varied, I guess it's not the standard path, but I was running our rock band when I got selected. And my very first assignment as an officer, as a junior officer, was right here at the Navy Band in Washington, D.C. And I will never forget thinking, just about a month after I'd gotten here to DC, I'd commissioned, gone through my training, and now here I am in Washington, DC. And one of the first engagements they gave me was what they call a Pentagon arrival at the Pentagon, which is a formal arrival where our Secretary of Defense receives his counterpart from a foreign country. And I'll never forget, this was Israel that we were receiving that day. I've been in the band for about a month, and I'm not so sure that they do them this way anymore. We do them this way anymore, but the Pentagon arrival used to be a huge thing, or it would be a massive amount of troops that would all be trooped out there. And we would do a formal arrival ceremony full of fanfare and an inspection march and all of this. And I'll never forget standing on that field out there, kind of gazing down at all these troops as far as the eye could see and looking to my right. I'd never really seen the Pentagon before, and thinking to myself, wow, a couple of months ago, you were comfortable running a rock band in Rhode Island. Collins, what have you gotten yourself into now? How are we going to get through this? It was an amazing feeling, but luckily, I made it through the engagement, survived, and then my career as a conductor began.
That's a terrific story. I had a young lady who played clarinet in my high school band in California, whose mother was from Guam.
Oh,
What's a Guam native? I don't know what the native is. A native of
well,
Guam.
the native are Chamorro.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so she was just such a nice lady. That was such a good family. I miss them.
And I will tell you what, the jazz scene on Guam is really good. They have some fabulous players out there. I met some wonderful artists when I was out there that I played with outside of the Navy. And I just loved, we came to just love the entire island. We just loved uh, the community and the vibe that was out there. It was a wonderful place to be.
Sure is beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. So then you went to Newport, Rhode Island. You were running a rock band, and then you got a chance to go to DC. So can you walk me through the next step? How did you end up as captain commander of the Navy Band and the entire Navy music program?
I think that there are a lot of people who would ask that question, including myself. I pinch myself all the time and say, "How did you get here,
Right,
Collins?"
right.
And it really is about, you talk about personal growth, right? I mean, I've talked to you about a couple of things as we come here. When I went from high school to college, am I good enough to do this now, right? I'm uncomfortable. I was comfortable where I was before. And it was the same thing when I initially came in the Navy. Whoa, these are some really good players. Can I swim in this pool, so to speak? And then as I commissioned to become an officer, and I tell people all the time this, when you take that job and you have that feeling in your stomach, it's that pit in your stomach that's just there all the time. But then you do that job for 6 months or a year and you notice after a while, that pit in my stomach is gone now. What happened? Well, you grew. That's what you grow. Now, guess what? You need to find the next thing to do that puts that pit in your stomach again, or you'll stop,
That's
you know?
that's really good advice. I have to tell you, my listeners know my story very well, but I'll tell you briefly. I was a college professor. I taught high school band, then I went and got my doctorate, and I taught college music theory for 16 years. And I left college teaching because I was bored and I wasn't happy with kind of like, it's very cynical to teach theory after a while. It's just, the students don't like it. As I tell people, your best day teaching music theory is still not a great day for the students in the class. So I went and I took this job teaching fourth through eighth grade. And I have to tell you, I felt completely lost the first year. And here I am 25 years into teaching, and it's like these fourth graders are running circles around me. And that pit, it's that constant search for something to keep you interested. I think it's really important.
Absolutely. I mean, it is. They call it growing pains, right? I mean, that's what I call that. That's some growing pains. So yeah, I was fortunate enough. I had a duty station here in DC, and that was my first exposure to these musicians here who were just fabulous. And also, I had a chance to. I immediately uh, made a phone call to Tony Maiello and said, Tony, I think I'm in over my head here as a young officer. I really would like to expand my conducting repertoire greatly. And Tony, gracious as just an incredible human being. I mean, that's just all I can say about Tony Maiello. Incredible human being, an amazing musician. And he took me in as a student, and we would go every week, and I would take him in what I was working on, what I was conducting. And I worked with him all through my time here as a junior officer. And I was fortunate enough to be here. And then I got a small tour at the Naval Academy Band out in Annapolis. And both working with the musicians and working, like I say, with Tony during that time, it was just a wonderful time for me. And then it was time for me to go out. This is our career progression as bandmasters, to take my own band. So they gave me a small band, Navy Band Northwest, which is in Silverdale, Washington, which is right across the sound from Seattle out there in Washington. And then I was fortunate enough to take the Pacific Fleet Band in Honolulu, Hawaii, which was an amazing tour. And my wife would have stayed there forever if she could have, and I think I would have too. It was an amazing tour out there, and again, we got to do a lot of travel out there, and that was wonderful. And then the Navy selected me to go to postgraduate school, so I auditioned and got into the University of Illinois and did my master's in wind band studies at the University of Illinois. And I had just about a little more than a year to get that done, and then moved out, and I got the band out, the Commander Naval Forces Europe Band in Italy, which was, again, it was incredible. I mean, because we covered both Europe and Africa. So I had a chance to go from everywhere from Lagos, Nigeria, to Djibouti, to Vienna, to London. Um, I'm just grateful, honestly, just incredibly grateful to that. And then I came back and became head of the Navy music program. And then from that job, was very fortunate to be selected through a process. It's an application process. When Captain Walden retired, I had already become the executive officer, which is the assistant here at the Navy Band in Washington, D.C. And then the chief of naval operations selected me to be the 13th leader of the United States Navy Band in 2015. And I just have to say, I mean, it's really the culmination of all that is just working with a ton of good people. I don't care who you are, how far you've gotten in your career. If you don't step back and recognize that there's no way, like any number of people could be in this job aside from me. That's not false humility. The bottom line is any number of people could be in this job aside from me. I was presented opportunities by people who took care of me. I had people that I worked alongside who just did amazing work, um, and that all ended up, allowing me to have the opportunity to work with um, the finest musicians that I've ever had the chance to be around. And more important than that, and I'm not saying this as Pollyannish, but incredible human beings to go to work with every single day.
Having worked with and known a lot of military band musicians and DC musicians, the best of the best. And yeah, we're grateful. The community is grateful that you're all in those positions to be there for us. So, as I listen to your story, I'm struck by Guam to Newport to DC to Seattle to Pearl Harbor to Italy back to DC. Not bad places.
No, like I said, I mean, as I told you before I came in the Navy, I'd never been east of the Mississippi. So when I say, you know, I've told you a few people who I owe a lot to, but I and my entire family owe a lot to the United States Navy because it showed me the world. I mean, it literally showed me the world. I mean,
What?
I got to go everywhere. I remember my
Wow.
daughter, she had to do and my kids are older, are now they're in their 30s. And when my daughter had to do an essay to get into her master's program that she was doing, she said, she brought us this. She said, "There's this question about what's your home? Where's your home?" And like, where am I supposed to say my home is? I was born in Guam, but I don't even really remember Guam and this and that. So she came up with an essay, which I thought was amazing because you don't know the impact that this is having on your kids and your family, right? My career that all around. And she just said, "I don't really know how to answer this question. I guess I would just say the world is my home. I've had a chance to live everywhere. So I don't have one particular home, but I just call the world my home." And I thought, wow, honey, that's perspective I didn't have when I was your age for sure. And it actually did my heart a little good to know, okay, you were okay with all that we didn't ask you about as we moved you around for your entire childhood.
Yeah, my brother in 1990, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the breakup of the Czechoslovakia, he actually moved to Prague and became a lawyer for an international law firm. And so they lived in Prague and Slovakia and Budapest and Saudi Arabia. And so his kids were the same. They traveled around everywhere. They turned out amazing. They're just so worldly and such a broad understanding of the world around them. So
I mean, it just, once you get to know people, you just find out that people are people, right? When you sit down and break bread with somebody across from you, doesn't matter what country they're from or whatever, you end up talking about the same things. You find out we're all very similar in many ways. It breaks down all of the stereotypes that you have because you're just meeting human beings.
absolutely. Absolutely. No question about that. My wife is Bulgarian, so we've had an opportunity to travel and be there for long stretches of time. And yeah, I wouldn't trade that for anything, the travel and the people I've met. So where in Italy is the naval base you were? Was it in Naples?
It's Naples, Italy. Yes, and Naples is a very interesting place.
Mhm.
Uh,
It's the
I mean,
craziest streets I've ever seen have been in Naples, Italy.
absolutely. And learning to drive there was an amazing thing. I always said you just kind of followed an amoeba. The lanes mean nothing, but just get in that amoeba there and just kind of follow the swarm of cars wherever you're going. I will tell you this, incredible music, an incredible history of music in Naples. We had a partnership with the conservatory there, and they had a lot of the Scarlatti scores were there. And I remember going to the library and I was amazed by it. It was matter of fact to them, as I was blown away. But Naples, just incredible history of music, and so they had this great sort of history in opera and that there. But they were fascinated by the wind band. So I would have their conductors from that were in their conservatory program. They would come and they would come and conduct our wind band because that was different literature for them. And I'll never forget we did Frank Kelly's Vesuvius, right? So,
Sure,
and
sure.
they thought that was amazing,
Uh-huh.
that piece of music, but they hadn't been exposed to it.
That's funny. Yeah. I spent one day in Naples. I half the day in the city, and then I took a train over to Pompeii and got to see Pompeii, and I'll never forget that.
It's
Plus,
beautiful, and if you get a chance to go the Amalfi Coast, which is right just south of there, it's some of the most spectacular scenery in the
mhm,
world, actually.
plus that's the birthplace of pizza, and I'm telling you, you
Mm,
can't get a bad pizza in Naples.
very true.
Anyway, okay, enough of travel talk. My new podcast. All right. So one of the things that I've been kind of hearing as a theme as we've been talking is you very much have a growth mindset. You're very much looking for the next opportunity to grow, to learn. You're not scared of the challenge. You're not trying to put yourself only in positions to be successful. You're putting yourself in positions to learn. And I think as teachers, that's really what we're trying to teach our students is that you may not be good yet, but you will get there. And so I was wondering if maybe you could just kind of like focus in on that a little bit.
Wow, I guess I just never thought about it that way, Mark. I guess I just felt like I found myself in these situations that I needed to survive. But I think it's important. I guess if I think about that, I think sometimes the three hardest words in the English language to say are "I don't know." But if you're not willing to say "I don't know," then nobody will ever teach you anything. So you end up always not knowing, right? So I guess I've just found myself willing to say, or I've found an experience to go, I don't know, I want to learn that thing. So let me go be a beginner at that and put my ego away. And I think, from a conductor standpoint, if we can put it that way, you need to put your ego away every single day, especially in the position that I'm at here in the United States Navy Band in Washington, D.C. When I stand on that podium and I say this, I am not the best musician in the room. I am not by a long shot. And there's a ton of experience out there that all of those folks have. So I need to, as we're working through things, I, I'll take information. I want information. I want the expertise of those people that I'm working with, because in the end, then the next time I go back to do something, I know that person just gave me something that I'm going to take with me. And now the next time I've got that tool in my tool bag, for the next time I go. But I think it's sometimes we let our ego get in the way of things, that fear of failure, um, and it stops us from experiencing something, and we're afraid of the experience because we really don't know how to deal with it, and we're afraid that somebody will find out we don't know. And what's the worst that can happen if somebody finds out you don't know? People are generally pretty nice and they want to help you. They'll teach you.
Yeah, that imposter syndrome is real though in music. That
Oh,
idea that you don't really know and then you're just kind of faking it. I mean, I think a lot of musicians, a lot of feel that way. It's
Oh, and I don't want to say that I don't have it. I have it every single day. I mean, the more I learn about music, the only thing I learn is that there's more that I have to learn. It's a never. It can be frustrating some days when I sit here and go, I'm working on this score, but what's the point? There, I have infinitely more to go. Like I'll never get there, and you have to just kind of slowly go. But I'm just going to do what I'm going to work on, what I can work on, and I'll know what I can know, and however far it goes is however far it goes, but you'll never get there. The clue that somebody has no idea what they're talking about is that person who comes to you and tells you, I've got it. I've learned everything. I've got it. That's your clue that that's not an individual, because that individual has no idea what else is out there. Then they don't have it. Some of the finest musicians, people, I don't care what line of work that you're in, you'll find that people who are at the top of their profession, those folks are the most curious and actually the most willing to say, teach me about that. I don't know something about that. They have no ego about those sorts of
yeah, there's no question. I don't remember if I've told this story on the show, but I had a piano teacher in college that I took lessons from in the summer, and he was German and he was from Munich. And actually, he grew up during the Second World War and told me all kinds of crazy stories about how they would turn off the power in the building and just check everyone's radio to see what they were listening to. like crazy things.
Wow.
But he ended up emigrating to the United States, and he was amazing. He like worked with Karl Orff in Munich after the war, and but he was great. He had this really deep insight into music and teaching. I remember one summer, I must have been a sophomore in college. I had just discovered the Debussy String Quartet, and that piece is incredible, incredible. And I remember going with a little mini score I had from the library to my piano lesson, saying, "Axel, can you like what makes this so great?" And he looked at me and he kind of like gave me that look. And he said, "You're asking a question that's like taking the ocean out a teaspoon at a time. I can't answer that." And it was that the first time someone said, look, you're just dipping your toes here. You got a lot more to,
Absolutely.
a lot longer to go. And I'll
Yep.
never forget that phrase about taking the ocean out a teaspoon at a time, because that's what it is. And that's what I've told my students my whole career is everything's a drop in the bucket. By the time you get through your career, you're going to have buckets full of information and talents and skills that you've acquired along the way. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. And there will be more. There will be more
there
that you
will be
just have
more.
to get to.
All right, I keep getting off task here. We should talk about the Navy bands. Tell me, I know that the DC bands, there's, well, one for each branch, right, in DC? Except the Coast
In
Guard?
DC,
The
the
Coast Guard.
Coast Guard is up in, I believe they're in New London, Connecticut. Of course, the Marine Band is right across the street from us there in Washington, D.C. And of course, we've got the Army Band here. We also have the Air Force Band, and we've got the Army Field Band, which is up in Fort Meade.
Right, right. Are you all in that same little area by Arlington National Cemetery?
I mean, I guess we're within probably 10 miles of each other, I would
Wow.
say.
Wow. Yeah, I was on that base. I saw the Old Guard that they did their Twilight tattoo. I saw that one year, one summer. What a great show that is. But anyway,
Oh, the Old Guard is spectacular. It's an amazing thing to take in.
yeah, no question. So tell me about the Navy band, though.
Okay, the United States Navy Band here in DC. We are we have 174 members. Of course, you're familiar with the concert band, but we also have our ceremonial band, right, which is an incredibly important function here, performing for the very high-ranking dignitaries. And of course, our primary mission is to support the President of the United States and anything that office would require of us. But we also have a number of specialty groups that reside with us. So we have uh, our Country Current, which is a country and bluegrass band that was begun by Bill Emerson, who just recently passed away, but he's in the Bluegrass Hall of Fame. That's an incredible group. The Commodores Jazz Ensemble, our Cruisers Rock and Roll Ensemble, and our Sea Channers Chorus. I tell our new folks who come in the building all the time, um, get outside of your own group that you're involved in, because there's somebody in this building who can teach you about any idiom of music you wish to learn about
True.
as you walk in. We had a great drummer who just retired a couple of years here. He was our former drummer in our rock group, and he told me, and he's a fabulous player. He said, "I love coming to work here every day." And I said, you don't have to say that to me, because I'm the commanding officer. He said, no, no, I'll tell you, sir, why I mean it. He said, because there's something to learn from somebody every day here. Somebody's an expert at something that I'm not an expert at, and I learn something every day when I come in the door. I thought, well, that's a great way. That's a great way to look at it.
Hmm. Can I ask how much overlap is there between the groups? Do musicians play in multiple groups?
We do. I mean, if it's needed, occasionally, like if they're down a trombonist in the Commodores, we may have a trombonist in the concert band who is familiar with those styles, and they will head down there. Actually, I have a couple of vocalists in the Sea Channers Chorus right now who are over, because we have some new vocalists coming into Country Current, so they're over backfilling and working with Country Current. So we have an incredibly versatile set of musicians. I'm just amazed at the talent, what they can do, stuff that they're not particularly signed up to do, but they come to you and they have this incredible talent. And you're like, how are you so good at two things? I'm trying to be good at one. And so we do a lot of that, and we do some mixing and matching too. I am very much about not categorizing and siloing music. I think we do that all the time, right? this is classical music, this is chamber music, this is rock music, this is, well, what about just music? So if I need a couple of vocalists and I need a banjo player and I need a woodwind quintet, if those are the forces that are required to produce this piece of art, why can't we use them? Why does it have to be funneled down one particular avenue, if that makes
Mhm.
any sense?
No, absolutely. I was looking at your rosters here. I'm sorry, as you're speaking, and I find it really interesting that you're the director of the Country Current is from Windsor, Virginia. That's talking about being on brand.
Yes, it's perfect, right?
It is. I taught for a year up in Western North Carolina, and I remember sitting on my porch when I first moved up there. This is Sylva, North Carolina, and the teenager across the street was across the dirt road was playing banjo on his front porch, and I was thinking, "Wow, I am really in the mountains of Appalachia
It
right
is.
now."
And you know what? Those guys can play banjo. I
Oh
mean,
my goodness.
there's some fabulous players. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, that's really interesting. One of the questions I have about the military bands, and I don't know if you can talk about this or not, but I maybe it's a false impression, but I always kind of grew up. Is there like a specialty in the different branches? Like it seems like the Air Force, because of Glenn Miller, seems to have the big bands, more big bands than the other branches. And when I think of the Navy music, I think of the Sea Chanters first. No offense to the concert band, but that's the group that really stands out. And I just wondering, is there anything to that, or is that just my misplaced perception?
It's very interesting, but like here in DC, it would be different. Out in the fleet bands, when I initially came in, it was really the Navy bands were big band oriented, and we were known for our jazz and big bands. We've since changed that and sort of as I have moved into my role where I sort of have a say on it. I say, if ceremonial functions is our primary mission, we need to hire to that mission. So we've gone to hiring to that mission and then going from there. So we've seen our wind bands actually get much better in the 30 some odd years that I've been. Now the Navy band has always been,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
top shelf wind band, but we've seen our fleet bands become more sort of wind band centric, and that is because the primary mission is a ceremonial band, and the ceremonial band would be, I mean, those skills that to play a good march, to play good ceremonies, are akin to what would make a wind band.
So now, are those fleet bands? Are they like the other services where they do have also a rock band, a jazz group, or is it just
Yeah.
ceremonial?
Yeah, we require those folks. So if you're audition for a fleet band, we're testing all those styles, right? We need to make sure that's great that you can play a march. Can you play some changes for us as well? Can you play the commercial style? We're going to do an Earth, Wind, and Fire medley next week. You know what I mean? Can you play in the brass quintet? All those kinds of things. And frankly, even up here in this band here, when we go out and do a concert when we're on tour or what have you, we're not doing necessarily a wind band heavy repertoire. We are playing for the taxpayer who is coming to see us. So our folks here, when we go out and do a concert band show, that's a difficult show to play because certainly, there'll be maybe a traditional transcription, and of course there will be marches, or I will definitely hear about it from the audience if there are not marches. There will be a commercial vocal tune on there. There may be a big band style on there. So these folks, I mean, at the drop of a hat, right? One tune we are playing legit wind band literature. The next tune, the style is Earth, Wind, and Fire, and they have to be able to adapt to that, immediately.
hmm I tell you, I have nothing but respect for the arrangers and the military bands who have to do arrangements in all these different styles and genres every week, and they're constantly jumping from one thing to the next. I think it's just an amazingly versatile skill set for these arrangers.
We have a couple of great arrangers here, and I give them a lot of work. I'll just put it that way. I give it. What is the next idea that the captain has, and how many hours is that going to take? But they deliver incredible product. We have a unit that we take out for some of our bigger productions, which would be our Navy Day concerts or our holiday concert. And it's kind of a hybrid group. I mean, it's a smaller wind band bigger than a pit band, but a smaller wind band with a rhythm section, a rock band rhythm section, the chorus, and then usually a couple of singers out front. There's nothing written for that ensemble at all. So when we go out and do these large productions, every single one of the tunes that we're doing is being arranged by our arrangers for the entire production. So when you see our holiday show or our Navy Day show, which we do a broadcast, those are all that 100% arranged by our staff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's very interesting to me, the mission of the military bands as far as outreach to the public and providing a basis for kind of what am I trying to say? Maybe more like there's music, always music going to be in the communities through the tours that you do and through the bases and the fleet bands and the in every branch. But can you talk to me about specifically music education and what the Navy Band offers music educators?
Well, I mean, like I said at the beginning of this, it's music educators who provide us our very people who are in the band. So what we provide to them, that's a very important part of our mission. So um, we have a number of online tools that we have for educators to go and take a look at our website. Everything from instrumental videos, and we try to make ours a little. We have a little bit of attitude here at the United States Navy Band, so there's a little bit of humor with some of those things, so that if is a kid interested in playing the trumpet, they can go and look at that. But we also offer out clinics, and during the last year and a half or so of the pandemic, a lot of our groups will have them come in and they'll do master classes over Zoom or whatever the app may be, to work with folks. And when we go out on tour, that's a big part of going out on tour. We like to go into schools, and I like to get these we like to get our players face to face with whether it's the high school level, whether it's at the university level. But we take that time. We may do the concert at night, but then the next day, if that program is interested, we will take a group of players and we will go spend time with those students to either do master classes, listen to those kids play, or provide classes, or do what I'm doing here. Tell you what the job is all about.
Sure,
Here's
sure.
here's a military band opportunity. The bottom line is, this is part of it. We are the taxpayers band. Part of being the taxpayers band is those folks are taxpayers. We owe them a service, and I feel strongly about that.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so let's talk nuts and bolts as far as that goes. Let's just say, for example, me. I teach fifth through eighth grade right now. My fourth graders aren't learning this year because of the we're just coming out of the pandemic. I just restarted my band program, so it's all starting from scratch. I have five fifth grade percussionists. They are basically on double stroke rolls right now. If I wanted to have a musician come in and Skype with those five during their 45-minute pullout, how would I go about doing that? Whether
You would
it's
just contact our operations office. They would put you right in touch with, whatever specific instrumentalist you were looking for, and then we would find a way to get some. We just did some stuff with a couple of schools in Virginia just this month, where I had folks again through Zoom. We had it was a woodwinds class, so they wanted a woodwind quintet, then they wanted our saxophone quartet, then they wanted an individual saxophonist, and we met all of those demands in like in an hour long class period. So it's our educational outreach is something that is very big for us. I think we've done some blasting out on social media, on Facebook and some platforms where we're saying, hey, if you're interested in us doing clinics, please contact us. So if you check our social media handles, I guess that's what the young people say. If you look at where we are out on social media, you'll see an advertisement with contact information.
Yeah, I have to tell you that I do use the Navy Band videos for the instruments for my beginners when when I'm recruiting them. To say, okay, watch these videos. Tell me what you're interested. Give me your top two choices. I use your videos.
I'm
So
glad you do.
yeah,
I'm
no,
glad to see that that's effective, because when we were making those, we did think about it like, hey, if you look at this through the eyes of a kid, what would interest a kid? Not not necessarily being so completely formal, but what is going to catch the attention of a 9 or 10-year-old,
Yeah.
whatever it
And
may be.
that's the
So yeah,
age.
this
Yeah.
that those are effective.
Yeah. And the field band videos are good too, but I just prefer yours. So I'm just going to throw those
Well, I will tell you,
friendly.
we're all doing this stuff, right? We're all doing this stuff because I think we all feel the same way, right? We owe something back. We were all elementary school students at some point, and wouldn't we have liked, and you never know what's going to turn the light on for a kid. What's the thing that's going to turn a light on for a kid? It could be something as simple as a video that 30 years from now,
They
the
remember.
principal trumpet in New York Philharmonic is saying, I saw this video and I just knew I had to be, who knows what it's going to be, right?
When I asked that origin story, you would be amazed at what triggers people. Yeah, there's a large number who grew up the children of band directors, but there's also a large number who it's just some random occurrence. Their father bought them a trumpet in the pawn shop, you know, and that became what they played. And there's just you just never know, as you say. Just like you said, 10 years to build something up. You also never know what turns them off of music. So
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yep.
yeah, so that's terrific. I mean, I really encourage listeners to avail themselves of, what the service bands have to offer. Can I just ask a nuts and bolts question about that? So, like, if I were to send an email, how does that get coordinated? Is there like, would they send someone who's just available from any of the Navy bands, or like, how does that work?
No, absolutely not. I mean, if you send an email to us, we actually have an education outreach coordinator.
Okay,
So
so I would get a Navy
it would go
band.
exactly to that education outreach coordinator. And you also have a contact, right, that you're looking at right now.
I understand. I understand.
I knew if you were interested, I can absolutely put you in touch with our education outreach coordinator. So we have somebody who's in charge of that, who actually does work with all the units in the building to say, hey, contacted by this school, they're interested in this particular group. And so can we see where we can find a time to work it out, and we put them in touch.
That's really interesting because, as I said, our nearest, we have two military bands that are nearby St. Louis. We have the Scott Air Force Base Band of the Midwest. They're just down the road from me here, and then we also have the Army band that's at Fort Leonard Wood, which is a training center kind of west of the city. And so, yeah, I mean, I would look to them first, but it's nice to know that I could go to one of the DC bands and say, hey, you know,
Sure. Yeah, there's nothing like having them there in person, right? Because then I can, if it's a drummer, I can look at your technique. I can absolutely just kind of grab your arm if I need to, you know what I mean? And go, hey, wait a minute, hold the stick
I
this
do
way.
I do like the idea of bringing someone on Skype from Washington D.C. though. It's like just sort of for the kids to be like,
Like you say, it's whatever turns the light bulb on or whatever excites them about learning that day. Yeah.
all right, Ken, I feel like I've exhausted most of the background stuff. Is there anything that I've missed that you wanted to talk about the bands or?
The bottom line I would say is, what we tell our musicians here when they come into the United States Navy Band is you have to understand the concept of service. So you have worked your entire life to develop a craft where you're probably the top 1% in the country at doing this particular craft. And now you're going to hand it over to the service of your country, right? Because this is music for a purpose that we do here in all the military bands. It's not music for music's sake. Now we do music at a very high level, and we want to do that. But the bottom line is the reason we are hired by the United States Navy is to perform music is as a communications tool. So our job satisfaction obviously comes from performing music at the highest level, but the bottom line, our satisfaction has to come from, did what we produce connect with someone and provide something to somebody else? Because communication means somebody has received what it is that I have said. And so if you are willing to take your art that you have worked on your entire life and hand it over in service to someone else, and you get satisfaction from what you provided to someone else, you will be at home in this particular job. That is our job. And I tell these players too, no, we are not shooting rifles. We are not the ones that are on the front lines. But the bottom line is you have cultivated something so near and dear to your heart, something that I would venture to say defines you, and you turned it over to the service of your country. If that's not patriotism, I don't know what is. So when somebody says thank you for your service, you just say, you're welcome. You are served.
I'm going to take a moment and tell you a personal anecdote. And I don't do it out of self-promotion, even though it's going to be self-promoting in its way, but it's not meant from that place. I'm a composer in addition to a teacher and a podcaster. And I had an opportunity to write a piece, and it was just premiered this past weekend, and it's really fresh on my mind. I wrote it. My nephew, in 2020, died of an overdose, a heroin overdose. He was 21, and this happened in Pueblo, Colorado. And after, when I was at the memorial service, I reached out. I said to Facebook, "Is anyone in the Pueblo area who has a concert band that might read a piece for free or might play a piece for free that I write in honor of my nephew?" Well, I got in touch with Alan Mills at CSU Pueblo, and he put me on their Festival of Winds. And so I had this incredible premiere, and I wrote this piece about my nephew. And I'm going to say, I've never written a piece that good, and I've never had a standing ovation from an audience. And it was just such a touching moment. It was such a meaningful musical experience. And my brother and sister-in-law were in the audience to hear it for their son. And, just the music stuff aside, we're musicians. We know what we do. We know what we're about. We know what music does. But my brother somehow managed to gather himself and say a few words after the piece. He was presented with a plaque from the conductor, from Alan. And he said, and I wish I could remember his words exactly, but he said, music has the ability to express the ineffable. My brother's a little bit of a poet. And, and he turned to the band through the microphone and said, "You all have a gift that you carry with you through your life that you can give to other people through music." And when you were talking about that, I started to get teary because I was thinking about that moment when he said that, because that's truly it, that communication, what music can do, the power that it has to connect people emotionally, and to have people who never knew my nephew in the audience crying for his loss and the loss of others who have, through opioids and drug addiction. It was a powerful moment, and just, I know it comes off self-serving a little bit, but when you were talking, it really made me kind of tear up there.
Well,
So
thank you for writing the piece. I know that couldn't have been easy to do.
Oh no, it's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Part
And
of you away. Yeah.
I'll tell you, I had my last guest was Matthew Maslenko, and I didn't think I was going to finish the piece at all. I was like, I'm not going to finish this 4 weeks ago. And I actually had a conversation with Matthew for the podcast. And I asked him a question about commissioning and his dad. And I said, "So what did your dad say about commissioning?" And he said, "My father always believed about writing the piece that the commissioner needs, not that you think they want."
Mm.
And as soon as he said that, it became about my brother and my sister-in-law and my niece. And then suddenly I could write it, because when it was about me, I was going nowhere.
Yeah.
Right? So it was really interesting.
It's incredible that you say that, because like you said, you gave a piece of yourself to that, and frankly, it takes a lot of courage to do that. Really.
Yeah. It's like you said, as a composer, one of the things that I've always struggled with is not necessarily a fear of failure, but a fear of success. Like, how do I do the next thing? I did that. How do I keep that up? And
I don't know how you guys do that, honestly. I mean, it's one thing to arrange, to compose where it's a blank sheet of paper. How do I put the first note down? Like, that to me that's incredible, because I do not have that gift. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah. A lot of people ask, and I don't really have a great answer ever. It's you just do it a lot, and you gather ideas, and, you build a repertoire of things to write.
Wow.
Yeah, it was something, but I mean, it's just so powerful still in my mind. So anyway, it comes off as self-serving, but I promise you and my listeners, it's not.
Thank you for sharing that.
I appreciate that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Tatum, and I'm the host of Ictus, the Evolving Conductor, a proud member of the Muted Podcast Network. Ictus is your source for any and everything conducting, listening, teaching, and music making. Treat yourself to a dose of musical inspiration as we pick the minds of great conductors and delve into noteworthy repertoire. If you're a musician, teacher, or conductor, you found your people. New episodes are released on Thursdays, and you can find Ictus anywhere you listen to podcasts, or ictuspodcast.com. That's IC2US podcast.com.
All right. Are you ready to do my enlightened round? You notice I don't say lightning.
Enlightened. I think I heard you
Enlightened.
talk to Paula Kreider. Isn't that when you started this
Yeah, I think
enlightened
I might
round?
have enlightened because I never knew what to call it because, people say, oh, it's our lightning round, our bonus round, but nope. This is all very slow. I suppose I need to have some kind of like meditative, sound hit at this point. All right. So, Ken, the first question is probably the one that draws the most controversy, but where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
Wow, there it is. The, the bottom line is for a group like in an academic setting, I guess I would say it's it's when competition interferes with learning, right? Because the kids are supposed to be learning, and it's all well and good to go to a competition and get a one at festival or take home the trophy. But if it's that your band only did three works all year long because you wanted to just perfect those three works and only took these particular works to festival because you knew that they would safely get through, what have we really taught the kids at that point other than how to kind of game the system, right? And win the trophy. So I guess I would say it's there. I talked earlier about the Reno Jazz Festival and always going to that. And to me, it was never about winning. I mean, I enjoyed the best bands; they sounded great. But it was about listening to great music. It's about listening to great music and enjoying it. And certainly, there are objective elements of music that we can all kind of grade, like intonation and is rhythm right and all this. But there's a feeling to me that's far more important than a feeling that's generated than did somebody play perfectly in tune and did they not chip a note and whatever it is. I'll say here at the Navy Band, one of the things we do and that I tell my players is take a chance. We're at a concert. What's the worst thing that can happen? Let's go for it. And we may get chills down our spine. We may come very close to crashing and burning. We've had both happen, right? But we're going to take a chance. I might push a tempo a little bit to get us. You may push your volume a little bit, or we may pull it back. But let's take the hairpin curve. I mean, we're driving a Maserati here. Let's take the hairpin curve at 90 miles an hour and see what happens here on this particular performance and not worry so much about what is the worst that can happen when we're on that stage. So it kind of comes far afield from the competition and music thing, but it really is about, if you don't take that chance, you never get the chills down the spine. It just never happens.
It goes back to the growth mindset. If you're interested in the result, then you're not interested in the growth.
Yeah, exactly. So, and there are chances I've taken that the band would prefer I didn't, I'm sure. and there are sometimes that the folks on stage will take a chance and I kind of look a little bit like, what's going on? But we never, we hug after, and we all know we're just after that. We're all chasing that moment. And bottom line is, did the audience feel that? Did we create that? Did we communicate that feeling to the audience? So if competition gets in the way of that, not so much about that. Now, understand, as a professional musician, competition is a way of life. It's just, you cannot ever get away from that. This is a job where supply will always be far greater than demand if you wish to be a full-time professional musician. And even when you're in the band, like when we do productions, hey, we have a solo vocal thing. We'll have 10 people that want that particular part. And so they gather and they come and they're just used to it. We're going to audition. But one of the things I try to talk to people about is never attaching your self-worth to how well you play your instrument. And I think that's one thing that a lot of young people sort of have a hard time with. You are a great human being, whether or not you win this audition or lose this audition. Frankly, you're a great human. Your value as a human being has nothing to do with how well you play a musical instrument or ever will.
Absolutely.
Bottom line. And so separating that self-worth and just saying, we're just trying to find the best person for this particular job at this time. It does not mean you are a bad human being because you didn't get this job. But that because we're so involved in our music making that we can feel that way. It's attached to us. So I try to separate those things. Understanding it's going to be competitive. There's only one job. 10 people want it. We're going to pick one. 9 people aren't going to be happy. It doesn't mean you're not fabulous at what you do, number one. And 1A, it doesn't mean you're not a great human being. You are. That doesn't have anything to do with the fact you didn't get picked for a particular part.
As I tell my fourth graders or fifth graders or sixth graders, it doesn't matter how you play on this concert. Do the best you can, because your parents and your grandparents are out there are going to love whatever you do, because they're always going to love you for who you are, not how you play that clarinet. And this is going to bleed into the next question, but I think teachers also attach like if they have a bad teaching day, it might make them down because they feel like it's something about them. And it's not. You're separate from what you do as a person. So
Yeah, I mean, we have the same way. I've driven home from concerts before where it's like we didn't have the night we were supposed to have. And I find myself just beating myself up all the way home about what did we, I think I took that tempo too fast. How could I have done that? And realizing that I just need to let go. You did what you did. It's over. It's done with. It's temporal. It was in the air. It's gone. And now we move on. Easier said than done.
so the next question kind of sort of plays into this a little bit, and it's how have you found a work-life balance in your career as a musician?
It's kind of a paradox, right? Because I don't think any of these musicians who play in these bands or play in the orchestras, or you great educators, you wouldn't be in the position you're in if you actually practiced work-life balance all the way through, right? The reason these players play at a world-class level is because at some point in their life they literally shut themselves in a room and it was all they existed to do. It's why we achieved the, the art that we achieved. So that being said, when you get to the end of this life at some point, there is, and that comes with age. I think we all realize that, hey, wait a minute, there is more out there, and certainly when you have a family. So for me, honestly, it's one of the things. The one thing I control in my day is how early I get up. And I say that because what I've learned is on my weekends, I like to have my weekends with my wife now. She likes to have time with me. I can still get up early in the morning and get a couple hours of score study done or whatever. I don't have to sleep. I can get up at 5 a.m. And by 7 a.m., when she's getting up and she's done whatever, I'm 2 hours done with score study or whatever work I need to be done. And now we can move on. We can move on with our day, and I'm not interfering with the family. So it's one of those things. I don't know if that's work-life balance. It's just cutting off some sleep in some ways. But I definitely, you understand that when you get to the end, it really isn't about your work in the end. It's about people. And if people don't want to be around you, or you don't want to be around people, then you've done something the wrong way, right? No matter what it is that you've done. And that means spending time with them and valuing them. So I look to do that. And the other thing I look to do is have some interests outside of music. You know, I'm an avid runner. I love to run, and I'm an avid sports fan. And avid is probably light in terms of my love of sports. So I am a. I don't know if I should say this, but you can go ahead and broadcast it. I'm a Stratomatic baseball geek. So I absolutely love my little Stratomatic baseball during baseball season. I play that. So I have my different hobbies that I enjoy.
And I always tell young teachers too, and young musicians, is that, the work tends to be more intense early in your career. And then as you get older, it's not that you work less, but you work smarter, because you've learned how to do the things that you need in more efficient ways. And so you can get more done when you're getting older. As you age, like you say, the wisdom comes to get more work done without, having more of a balance perhaps than you did when you were 20.
And I would say that becomes a necessary thing because we get tired as we get older. So I will find that I hit a wall and I'm just not, if I'm studying a score or I'm working on something in regards to motion or whatever it is I'm working, I get to a point where I'm just not, no more is happening. And then I go to sleep. I get up the next day or I take a couple hours away and I come back and there it is all of a sudden. And so you realize that, hey, pounding through for 5 hours here is not the smartest thing. Maybe taking some time away and then coming back is actually the smarter way to go about it.
I've been wondering that because I'm 50 now, and I've always been a night owl. I've always done my work at night. like, the family goes to bed, and that's when I go to my computer and my desk and I sit and start composing or doing the lessons or whatever it is that's the ball that's in the air at the time. And I'm finding that, those sessions, I'm more tired in the morning and I need to maybe look at maybe flipping that, but I don't know. Morning just doesn't appeal to me.
It was the Navy that made morning appeal to me. There was no choice.
Yes, and that's true. When I did teach high school and I had jazz ensemble at 7 a.m., yes, I was more of a morning person at that point. Years of being a college professor have, destroyed my sense of time. All right. So, Ken, this is a big question, and I get all kinds of answers for this. But what are the challenges from your perspective facing music education or wind ensemble band music, and how do we best meet them?
Well, that's interesting. I don't know that I'm qualified to answer that because I'm not in, the music education field. I sit outside of it. Some of it is probably, there are some. I'm in an area here in Northern Virginia where the programs are well funded. We have a lot of folks. We have a lot of people in our band programs around here. I mean, if you go to certain uh, spots in the country, you will find band programs are thriving. They're amazing. But then you go to other parts of the country, and it's just it's just nowhere. And I don't have the answer for that. Some of it is resourcing and funding those programs. It needs to be as important. You know, I made my kids take music classes when they went through school. Now, my son really wanted to. My daughter did too as she went through. But I said, we're teaching, it's a requirement to learn to read. It's a requirement to learn to write. You must learn to do math. I believe you must take part in the arts too, because a society and you can look back through history where societies begin to fail is when the arts become less important and those arts start to crumble. You can look back and you can see it. So to me, it's us fundamentally realizing that you don't have to be a professional, right? I'm not a professional author. I learned to write. I'm not a mathematician, but I use it. I use these things. You should participate in some sort of artistic pursuit, and the wind band actually offers you just such a wide variety of opportunities. I mean, that's the thing. A wind band can be 60 kids big. It can be 20 kids big, right? We have all this flex instrumentation that's out there now that we're writing for. There's so many opportunities. It's so flexible and morphable into any situation that you would be in that I just see it as a very valuable medium for allowing a child to participate in making art, which I think is fundamental to building a good citizen as that person gets older.
And it ties in. I think the most common answer I get there is relevance.
Well, and I think it's constantly, are we pushing the boundaries again? Are we looking for what's the next thing? What needs to be written next? What needs to be commissioned next? And not looking back to, while I happen to absolutely love Paul Hindemith, and I love Persichetti. I mean, these are giants, Percy Granger. But what's next? What's the next thing? And what's grabbing that next generation's ear and figuring that out, right? It has to be in the substance of what it is they're writing. And there are some great young composers actually out there who are writing some really cool stuff that I think appeals to a younger generation if they get the opportunity to hear it.
All right. So this is my favorite question in the interview. If I had a time machine and I could bring you back to the afternoon of your high school graduation, what advice are you going to offer to yourself?
My goodness, my younger self. I think I would tell myself initially, don't worry so much about everything. It's going to be okay. All right. Don't worry about the little things. And there are a ton of little things, but step back and don't worry so much about everything that comes your way. I think I would also say, hey, be a little better at time management. When you're 18 years old, you believe that time goes on forever and it will never end. And I think I did a good bit of wasting time as I look back on that now, and I would have taken more advantage of the time that as I look at it now, you know, why was it that I wasn't able to get a particular assignment in, this assignment in, or that assignment in? It's very interesting. I went back to graduate school late in my life, right? I was in my I was in my 40s when I went back to University of Illinois, and both of my kids were in undergrad at the time. So we were all in school at the same time. So they came home for Christmas break, and I remember we got our grades. And going back to school in your 40s, I don't know. I found it cool because, I was just interested in everything I was studying, very much interested. And the time management thing I kind of had down, right? I just knew, hey, they're assigning this to read. I know the end of the semester is going to get really busy. I'm going to read this in September and write this thing that's not due until November now because I've got free time. So we got it. The kids came home and we shared our grades, and I had gotten better grades than my children, which I showed them, and they said to me, and I'll never forget my son saying to me, "Yeah, but Dad, you don't have a life. We have lives." And I thought to myself, "Oh yes, of course." And that's the perspective of the 18-year-old, right? I have
Oh,
things
yes.
to do. And so I think I would talk to myself a little bit about time management. But I think the most important thing I would tell myself is people are the most important thing. Bottom line, people that you come across on a daily basis. And not that I wasn't this way, but I would remind myself that to make it of utmost importance, kindness is the most important thing. To show a kindness is the easiest thing to do, but also needs to be of prime importance. So when you go about your day, understand that the people that you're engaging with, whether they can do something for you or whether they can do nothing for you at all, even more important there, showing kindness is probably the most important thing you can do in life. And I think we learn that as we get a little bit older, but I sure would have liked to thought about that more when I was an 18-year-old kid, because there are probably a few interactions that I have with folks that I would like to do over if I could.
All right. So now the next piece is not to be morbid, but to try to like suss out what you feel is most meaningful to you. We talked a little earlier about connections, personal connections. What piece of music would you want to perform or listen to or hear at the very end?
Oh my goodness.
Like if you could choose that.
It's hard for me to pick. I saw this question earlier, and I thought I have no answer for that because I'll pick one thing, and then 10 minutes later, I'll want to call Mark back and say, "Wait a minute, I take that back. I want another." I think of times that I've had, and they may not be the most technically demanding pieces, but I'll never forget being out on tour a few years back. Might have been 5 years ago or so, and we took out the Irish tune from County Derry, the Granger, because we were going to be out in March and we were going to be out on St. Patrick's Day. So we weren't doing it every night on tour. We had rehearsed it before we went out. It'd been a couple of weeks, and then it was St. Patrick's Day. I can't even remember where we were, but I remember we pulled it out on sound check and just kind of ran it through, and okay, everybody got it. And we got on the performance that night, and I had gotten word that somebody I had met, I had gotten word back, had we had lost somebody that I had met uh, previously, uh, that my family had known. And so I that was kind of in my mind just a little bit, and it wasn't a really good friend, but it was an acquaintance. And we got into that piece that night, and there was I can't explain the feeling of it. I mean, it's a simple piece, but it's also incredibly complex when you get into that work. And the band just was there. I mean, uh, they were there. It was incredible. I could feel it. It was right. It was the chills going down the back of my neck. And we finished, and again, I didn't know if they were feeling what I was. You don't know. And then we're in the moment, and we finished the concert, and it was a walking off the stage that night. My principal flutist just came running, and she was yelling for me, "Captain, Captain!" And I looked back like I didn't know if I had done something wrong or whatever. And she looked at me and she goes, "Did you hear Irish Tune tonight? Did you hear that?" And she had like tears welling up in her eyes, and she said, "That's that's the most amazing performance of that we've ever experienced. And I talked to several other people in the band. We're like, what in the world? Here's a piece that we had kind of worked on. I mean, we all know it, um, and it just came out. So when you're asking about, I guess you're talking about meaningful, right? And that's not the most technically demanding piece, and it's not the largest wind band work that was ever written. But that when you talk about having moments where music does something like that, um, yeah, if that would have been the last thing that I ever did, it would have been amazing. And the other thing, we did a piece. We do an international saxophone symposium every year here when there's not COVID. And the last major work I conducted before we went out on tour that year, right after the saxophone symposium. So this had been 2020, and it was a commercial tour that year. So we were just doing some commercial stuff, which was great. It was wonderful. But the last work we did was the Mezlanka, the concerto for saxophone, and Otis Murphy was the guest, and he played it. And we had a night that night again, which is it's a great piece of music, and I'm a Mezlanka fan. And Otis played it like he plays, which is just amazing. And if you ever get a chance to meet Otis Murphy, he's an amazing human being, an incredible human being. I mean, you can't, to me, Otis is just to love him instantly. And you can just see he's the same way back. And one of the highest level artists you'll ever meet in your life. And we had, again, so it's all about a feeling for me, right? That was an incredible feeling that I remember. And we haven't really had a major concert band show since, right? Because we've been trying to get back to back since. So I don't know if those are good answers to that question or not, but
I think it's a
what comes
great
to mind.
answer. That my answer is similar to that, but Irish Tunes in my top 5 great musical moments. I remember
Mm.
being a senior in high school. We played that as one of our festival pieces. That and the Holst and the Alfred Mad Major. It was a great program. And I remember it must have been like March in California, and I lived in the coast in the Monterey Salinas area. And I remember it was a warm day, which only happens in the spring and the fall there because of the ocean. And the high school I went to was like built in like the 1800s, the late 1880s, 1890s. So the band room was very old. And I can remember very high ceilings. And I can remember playing Irish Tune. And I remember the sun streaming into the window and the dust motes and the smell. And I was playing the first trumpet part. And I remember that high C at the end of that big peak. And I remember it sounded so good that day. The band sounded so good. And I remember thinking to myself, this is what I have to do with my life.
Mm.
And, it's just that power that those moments have to, it's like golf. I don't know if you've ever played golf, but you can be terrible for 70 shots. And then the 71st is like great. And then suddenly it's like you want to keep going. It's like, it's that moment, those moments that keep you going. And as a teacher, the tragedy of the last 2 years is I haven't been able to give kids those moments to keep them engaged in music, because without performances, they don't get that. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's my little soapbox.
Wow.
But yeah, that piece is incredible.
I totally get it. Oh, it really is. Yep.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything coming up that you want to share or promote? And I know as the commander of the Navy bands, there's a lot.
Of course I do. Of course I do. Actually, we just have this will be our first year doing this, but we have just created what we're calling the Alton Augustus Adams Senior Award for Emerging Composers. Actually, and Augustus Adams, he was chief musician. Augustus Adams, he was the first black bandmaster in the United States Navy. He actually came from the Virgin Islands. He really holds a significant place in the history of Navy music for us. He was just a pioneer for us in Navy music. He led an all-black band during the period of segregation, and he really believed that music in service to our nation could be a catalyst for social change. So we've named this composition contest after him, and what we're asking people to do is to write a chamber music work this year that reflects upon Chief Alton Adams' life, or the core values of the Navy, which are honor, courage, and commitment. So we're looking for an 8 to 10 minute work, and we're hoping that we get mini submissions that we can play through. And then this will be the first. We'll be doing this every year, and then we'll pick a kind of a different kind of composition that we'll want every year for that.
What's the age requirement?
From the ages of 18 to 39 is we're looking at. I have a big premiere coming up. We were supposed to premiere this at Midwest in 2020. This is how long ago. But I am a huge Eighth Blackbird fan, have been for a while, and reached out to them a few years ago to see if they would want to do a collaboration, and they were interested. And so we met, and we found a composer who is Viet Quang, who has composed a work called Vital Signs that we are going to premiere with Eighth Blackbird here on April 9th at the Rachel M. Schlesinger Concert Hall in Alexandria, Virginia. Our hope is we are also planning to play that at Midwest. We'll be at Midwest this year. And so we are planning on performing that with Eighth Blackbird at Midwest. So I'm totally excited about getting this work out there. But this is part of this, what I was talking about kind of pushing to the next thing, collaborating, something different, something new. And Viet has written something that I think is spellbinding. It goes along, if you listen to Eighth Blackbird and all that incredible rhythmic stuff that they do, it's all that, but made with wind band accompaniment. So we are very excited about that premiere. And then, as I mentioned, we are glad to get back out on the road. So our concert band is going to get out on the road on tour again this year. We'll be on tour from April 20th to May 4th, and we will be out in the states of Illinois, Wisconsin, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. And the Sea Chanters will also be out on tour. They'll be out on tour April 19th to May 4th, and they will be in Maryland, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. And if you can't remember all that stuff, you can go to our website, which will have the details for where all the performance dates. It will have all that. And our website is www.navyband.navy.mil. But what I usually do is I don't type all that in. I go to whatever my search engine is, and I just type in Navy Band, and I can tell you we are the first thing that pops up on all the search engines. So if you want to see the specific concert dates for those two tours, the Sea Chanters and the concert band, they will be there.
So you're going to be in my neck of the woods then. Are you doing mostly Northern Illinois? Are you going to be down in the St. Louis area, or?
You know what? I don't know. I'm going to get in the car and go where they take me. I will look at the website as well, to be honest, Mark, and figure out.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
All right, Captain Collins, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, through our website, like I say, www.navyband.navy.mil. And there's contact information right there. If you're interested in performances, like we mentioned earlier, if you're interested in having one of our groups, do some sort of clinic or master class for your school, that's the contact point for all of our information. And we welcome any and all inquiries. We encourage.
Ken, thank you so much for your time. You were very generous tonight.
Oh, absolutely. And Mark, thanks for what you're doing. I really enjoy your podcast.
Oh, thank you.